In 1956, there were 12,000 drive-ins in America. 95% of those are dead. And yet there are native Indians, the Crankaway Indians of Texas, who believe there is a spirit that lives on in these decayed temples where Americans once worshiped. They call it Wiskavanaha, or the spirit of blood, breasts, and beasts, or the 3 Bs. What you are about to witness is a summoning of that spirit, a return to a part of the American heritage that has all but vanished. It's a heritage of drive-in movies, controversial movies, groundbreaking movies, the weird, the offbeat, the strange, and most of all, the sleazy. You are about to experience one of the sleaziest movies in the history of the world.
I don't know about you, but when I see a sight like this along the American highway, I get kind of steamed. You know, there's not even any place where you can watch the classic movies anymore. Movies like Please Don't Eat My Mother and Gas Pump Girls and Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. And, you know, if they were to make Blood-Sucking Freaks today, who knows if anybody would even get a chance to see it. Not to mention the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. At least Saw is still the king after all these years, but I'm determined to do more than that. This series will bring you more than 1,000 of the sleaziest drive-in movies ever released. And this project, at our current rate of release, will be finished in the year 2116. But see, that's how dedicated we are to the preservation of the American drive-in. Kind of makes you sick, don't it? Well, this is where I live, and more important, this is the home of the sleaziest movies in the history of the world. Now, did you ever see one of these babies here? You remember Mamie Van Doren in those movies like High School Confidential, where she always wore cashmere sweaters that were 2 sizes too little, and she looked like she'd been shot through the back with a couple of cruise missiles? Well, for some reason, in the 50s and 60s, these industrial strength brassieres, you see how that thing stands out there? See, it pops right out like that. These things, it's like a double cone head attack on these deals. The breasts like this were considered so erotic that men would rather see a bimbo wearing one of these than to see her wearing nothing at all. Now, let me show you the difference. See this? This is a more modern type brassiere here. Droopy, isn't it? Cone head, droopy. See? So if you've been following along in our series of the sleaziest movies in the history of the world, then you've probably noticed that many of the actresses, they just strip down to their bra, and that's it, and it's considered a big deal. And actually, now that I think about it, some of the ones that took off their bras in those nudist camp movies, you want them to put those things back on. I mean, they had these mushy, droopy things. I don't even want to think about that. But also, their skin was the color of Elmer's glue, some of them. And, now, you know, now that I got that picture in my head, you know, some women just ought to keep those things caged up at all times. Anyhow, I didn't mean to get off on that, but it is important. Now, tonight, we have one of the most socially significant sleazy movies in history. It's called Suburban Roulette. Came out in 1967. It was the first movie to really deal with the subject of wife swapping. And it was made by our old friend Herschel Gordon Lewis, that Chicago advertising man best known as the father of the gore movie for classics like Blood Feast and 2000 Maniacs. But he had a period of about 3 years. It was during those hippie free love years where he made movies about drugs and rock and roll and taboo sexual subjects like wife swapping. And this is really one of Herschel's best films, because normally Herschel would film these scenes. They would just go on forever. He would just lock that camera down in the same position. But see, he couldn't do that in this movie because he was filming in this suburban neighborhood near Chicago's O'Hare Airport. and a plane went over that airport every 40 seconds, made him stop his camera. So thanks to the Federal Aviation Administration, this is a little bit better movie. Now, this movie was shot in about 9 days, and it was released a couple months after that, and it became instantly popular. It was always held over in the drive-ins, usually as a second feature, and it was not because it was that great a movie, but it was because it really hit a nerve, you know, this wife-swapping thing. Herschel always got attention, not so much for the movie he made, as for what the movie was about. And in 1967, wife-swapping was a really big deal. I mean, it also helped that his casting was pretty good, too. He rounded up all these local Chicago actors at one of those amateur audition nights, and he ended up with Elizabeth Wilkinson. Whew. She's that sad-eyed blonde. You probably remember her. She's a sex addict who only lives to cheat on her husband. And Tony McCabe and Vicki Miles are the free sex swinger couple that lives down at the end of the street and uses all the other couples for their own selfish pleasure. And Tony McCabe, you'll notice him because he's the handsomest guy in the movie, and he's the only pure D evil character in the movie too, but he's a real fine actor. And shortly after this movie was released, he was killed in a car accident. We should probably observe a moment of silence for that. It's another real strange incident in the weird career of Herschel Gordon Lewis. Now, be sure to watch for the big boozy Saturday night where the guys start auctioning off their wives. Now that is sleazy. I'm in awe of that scene. But after it's over, I'll tell you a little bit more about this famous bra. Which one is this one right here? This was actually worn by Elizabeth Wilkinson in Suburban Roulette. She had on this slinky dress too, and she had one of those Nancy Sinatra hairdos like on these boots are made for walking. Woo! Boy, she was hot. But anyway, I'll tell you about that later. Let's go ahead and watch the movie. And, you know, it's right after the big pool party scene. And come to think of it, Elizabeth, she had a couple of cruise missiles herself. She was something. Suburban Roulette, great movie. I wanted to demonstrate this for you for those who were still wondering how Elizabeth Wilkinson, the actress that played Eileen, could look that good in one of these bras and never take it off. I'm going to show you. See, now watch this. You see that? Number 7 reinforced limestone building material in that bra, and they still had their shape. They didn't change one bit. You see what I'm driving at here? You didn't know what those women's breasts looked like in the 60s. They never worked out. They could have had a couple of water balloons in there for all we know. So see, that's why they always keep their bras on in Suburban Roulette. I mean, was that sleazy? Do you agree with me? That is a sleazy movie. The late Tony McCabe, he is the sleaziest man alive, I'm telling you. The final rape scene in that movie might be one of the sleaziest scenes ever filmed. And I thought one of the best scenes that Herschel ever did, Herschel Gordon Lewis, he's not usually very subtle in the way he makes movies, but the very first time that Eileen and Ron have sex, remember they start groping each other in the room where little Cindy is sleeping. And it's a very painful scene and very true scene at the same time. And then one thing I wondered about this movie is when Margot starts to have those lesbo tendencies with Eileen, Eileen suddenly gets real offended about that kind of sex, you know, and that's the end of that. Now, I think today, if you were doing a movie about wife swapping in the suburbs, you'd have people trading off every which way. You'd even have the husbands jumping in bed together. But see, you couldn't go quite that far in the 60s. And actually, Herschel, when you think about it, he was actually kind of a prude. Because by the end of this movie, 2 of the 3 couples have learned their lesson. And the other couple are exposed to be the worthless scum that they are. And so it's really an anti-wife swapping movie. But of course, that's not what the advertising said on it, because they don't call them exploitation movies for nothing. But anyhow, Suburban Roulette made so much money that Herschel decided that he would make movies about all the other big relevant topics of the swinging late 60s. He made one called Blast Off Girls. It was about an all-girl rock band. The ad said they had mini skirts and many morals. And then he made one called The Girl, the Body, and the Pill, about this 16-year-old girl that becomes a United Way agency at the high school. And then he made How to Make a Doll, a movie about the computer revolution where these guys program a computer to create beautiful sex-starved women who will do anything they want them to. And he made that flick in 1968. That was a long time before the Stepford Wives. But do you think Herschel ever got any credit for that? Never got a single bit of credit for it. Well, I guess that's about it. I'm Joe Bob Briggs, reminding you that Elizabeth Wilkinson has popped her underwire support bra for the last time. The falcon has molted, the fat man bowls alone, but the drive-in will never die.